This week just became make or break for Penn State's 2025 recruiting class.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Two wide receiver priority targets are set to commit this week, Cyrus and Taz Williams, just in the matter over the next days. This could make or break Penn State's 2025 class. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Richie O'Leary is back, publisher of Penn State Rivals, Rutgers Rivals, and UConn Rivals. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So yes, it is a matter of days. Cyrus announces on July 11th. Taz Williams is set to commit on July 13th. And this is where Marcus Hagans is supposed to pay off as the wide receivers coach. It's just getting down to the wire, Richie. What seemed like strong, everyone was confident that Cyrus and Taz Williams, or at least more so, were going to commit to Penn State. And now these are just 50-50 battles. If Penn State were to potentially miss on both of them, I don't like speaking that into existence, but I feel like this is a make or break point for the Nittany Lions in the class of 2025, just because how much of a need wide receiver is.
Yeah, I think you can argue that. They have a couple on the back burner as well, just in case one of these guys ends up going elsewhere, like a Kobe Howard type, who's, a 4-star, number 145 in the country in his own right. So they do have some back burner guys, but I think they have a shot at landing one, if not both of these guys. I expect them to land at least one. If you asked me last week, I would have told you both of them are coming without a doubt. Yeah. Now it's getting a little closer, and that's just how recruiting works, especially with the way NIL is. Things change on a dime.
Yeah, Cyrus is just such a priority because he is in state. He is one of the top, and they're all quality 4-stars, right? I feel like you can't go wrong either way if you get Taz Williams, Kobe Howard. Ideally, you'd like to get all three, right? In addition to Cyrus to pair with Jeff Exner and Lyric Samuel, who I think are very underrated in their respective rights here. But I just don't like how close it's getting now. Cyrus didn't have a commitment date set just 24 hours ago.
Yep.
But now has it all planned out, and it's going to come down to Penn State and South Carolina. How close is this recruiting battle, Richie?
It's closer than anyone would like it to be. I think both staffs, whether it be Penn State and South Carolina, are they're not excited right now. They're kind of waiting to hear what Lex is going to say. They're both expected to talk to him today, at some point later today. And then he probably should give them his decision. And then it kind of starts to trickle out. And that's kind of how a little bit how we find out too. So we should expect some news within the next day or two. Obviously he commits in 2 days, but I think we'll probably know a little bit beforehand, sort of like his commitment date. Like I know he just announced it on social media yesterday, but I think we had it posted last Thursday on our message board. So if you aren't on there already, stay tuned for that. And I'm sure we'll have a Cyrus update as soon as these phone calls are pretty much done.
Yeah, I encourage you to check out happyvalleyinsider.com for all of that information as well. And Taz Williams, similar situation. He's 2 days behind Cyrus. How close is that battle? He's posting about Texas A&M, but then Southern Methodist isn't going away.
Yeah, I don't think Texas A&M is a threat. Sounds like they're not going to take him. They don't have room for him. He was a Texas A&M lean for a long time. But obviously some things change, and recruiting boards change constantly too, with commitments and decommitments. You see it all the time, but right now it's a 2-horse race. It's SMU or Penn State. And for most of you, you probably hear SMU and you're like, what the heck is he doing? Like SMU. But SMU has a crazy slush fund of NIL money. This is a school that, if some of you might recall, raised $100 million in 6 days over 30 boosters, this past fall, just to get into the ACC immediately. So now they're also in a power conference. That helps. He is from Texas. That obviously helps. But he does have ties to the Pittsburgh area. He has spent time in Pittsburgh, a couple of years in Pittsburgh, actually, when he was younger. But so it goes back and forth. We're still hearing Penn State at this moment, but SMU is upping their offer, it sounds like. So it's going to come down to if you want the money or not. And I think SMU can overpay more than what Penn State can. but obviously prestige, conference prestige too.
Right.
You go based on that, you could be the number one guy in this wide receiver class as well.
Yeah, and that's the kind of presence that Penn State needs. I'm not talking about a slush fund, but just to be able to compete with SMU. You say, hey, SMU is ready to up their offer. It's like, okay, what is Penn State really just banking on the fact that, hey, it's just the age, it's the modern age of college football and college athletics in general. Okay. Prestige. Can you get to the NFL? Penn State's been really good with that pitch for recruiting, and they have the results. There's plenty of players that James Franklin over his tenure has sent over to the NFL, but it's just not as easy as a selling point as it once was, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not as easy as it once was. On top of that, let's be honest, offense hasn't been a sure offensive
Not recently,
power,
no.
really. Yeah, especially from the wide receiver standpoint. I mean, running backs, you can argue, you could show them, hey, here's Miles Sanders, here's Saquon. You're going to see Nick and Katron in the league next year, and that's kind of just become a just constant pipeline in the NFL at running back. But wide receiver, Jahan Dotson, one of the more recent ones. But other than that, like, I guess Tinsley did make a little bit of a noise at Penn State, but there really hasn't been a ton of wide receivers that make the league. And if you're a wide receiver, you have to question it a little bit.
Yeah, you have to wonder if it's, hey, you're going to be the person, the player that's different, that's the difference maker for us. How much of that word is authentic? So let's bring it back to if this actually is a make or break point for the class of 2025. That is the case. That this breaks it if you miss on both. You cannot afford to miss on both. If Taz Williams selects SMU and Texas A&M, the posting about that's just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Okay, that's fine. But like Cyrus, because he's in state, because he is not, because you've lost how many top ranked kids out of Pennsylvania, you almost have to at this point, regardless if Lex Cyrus was a linebacker, a defensive back, or somebody. It's just the amount of players that are in the top 10 in Pennsylvania that have decided to leave for other programs, including legacy players. I just think is unacceptable when your whole mantra, when your slogan is, we dominate the state.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm looking at it. It's 6 of the top 10, 3 of the top 3 are all headed out of state, and they're not going. I mean, some of them are going to power programs, but you're losing legacy guys. Like Michael Carroll is just making leaps and bounds in these rankings, and this is a guy who, when he first got the Penn State offer, said, "I love Penn State. I really love the idea of playing for my father's school." And that, I should say, that was actually before the offer. Then they offered, and everyone was like, "Oh, yeah, that kid's going to Penn State." And then all of a sudden he commits to Alabama. And NIL played a factor in that one. Then you see Matt Zollers going all the way to Missouri. There's really no explanation. Don't get me wrong, Missouri is a solid program, but they're never going to win the SEC, if I had to guess. But the amount of money that they're apparently throwing at him is crazy. And at the end of the day, if you want to keep these kids in state, you got to start building up the Happy Valley United Fund, start building up just a slush fund in general. It doesn't all have to go through the collective, although that's the easiest way. But yeah, no, they need to start like you said, dominating the state a little more. Maxwell Roy's gone. Michael Carroll's gone. They just lost Andrew Olish, who was early on pegged to go to Penn State and then all of a sudden blew up. Usually when those kids blow up prior to NIL, they'd still end up at Penn State. But with NIL, they're just not ending up at Penn State anymore.
So that's what I mean when I say, especially the need at wide receiver, you can't afford it. It's good if you get at least one. You do have Kobe Howard as an option, but just the way that this recruiting cycle's gone, Lex Cyrus and Taz Williams almost become must-haves at this point. Now, Penn State, it's not that, okay, they're going to fall significantly out of the rankings. No, there are still other ways that Penn State can continue to bolster this class of 2025. We'll tell you how they're working on other defensive targets in this upcoming segment. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. I like going to Major League Baseball games in the summer, and the easy and fast way that I get tickets is through the Gametime app. Well, that's because Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. So that makes getting tickets easier and faster. And get this, prices on the Gametime app actually go down as it gets closer to first pitch. Killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. With the last-minute deals, you can actually save up to 60% buying last minute tickets, not only on MLB games, but sports in general, concerts, comedy theater, and so much more. You get flash deals, you have zone deals within the app, all in pricing and the seat views. So you don't second guess yourself. You're not wondering what it's going to look like when you get to the venue. I bought tickets for Pirate games, Philly games. Even when I'm out of the state of Pennsylvania, I've gone to the College World Series by buying tickets through the Gametime app. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So we addressed Taz Williams and Lex Cyrus, potentially Kobe Howard as well. Maybe they end up getting 3, maybe they end up getting none. But this is a turning point in the class of 2025. Now, over on the defensive side of things, it seems like it's going to be status quo, Richie, unless they do happen to flip a name later on in the cycle as football season rolls around. But that name could be Zahir Mathis, and then they're still targeting Randy Adirika. As far as everything else goes, there's really nobody new or anybody else that's on the radar. Maybe a Malachi Goodman as well. Now, he's offensive line, but primarily on defense, what we're focusing on here. These are the names that continue to pop up. But outside of the names that we've put out here, is there anybody else that could factor into Penn State's class of 2025 plans?
Kind of looking through it now. I mean, they already have 4 defensive ends, three if you don't count LeVar Arrington, who's kind of like that tweener build between edge rusher and linebacker. But yeah, no, I mean 4 DBs, 2 safeties, like they're all kind of pretty much set. Now they had 3 linebackers previously. They could revisit that down the line, but there's no names on the board right now. I should say Ty Jackson was a name they did like in early May / early June. Now they kind of shied away as he sounds like he's going to stay down south. But like you mentioned, defensive tackle Randy Adirika was actually supposed to decide today, but has postponed his commitment. It sounds like it's between Miami or Penn State. I know it sounds like he wants Miami, but Miami doesn't want him. But there's a weird scenario going on there where there's Jarquez Carter, who is actually higher on the board for Penn State at defensive tackle. Who's deciding between Miami and Ohio State, staying home or
go
going
figure.
Yeah. So it's all like a trickle down cycle right now, or trickle down effect, I should say. So whatever Carter does, who I believe is committing on the 18th, it's going to affect what Randy Adirika does. And that's kind of why we are seeing him delay his decision. But they're only going to take 1 defensive tackle. There's Yvan Kemajou, I don't even know how to pronounce it, to be honest. But he's a new 4-star that just got upgraded in our last cycle, or our last update, I should say. And he's probably one I'm keeping a close eye on as well, just because if they miss out on Carter, then it goes to Adirika. If they miss out on Adirika, then it goes to Yvan. So again, it's this trickle down thing where you keep just going lower and lower on the board. And at some point it's like, how much lower can you get? Like, and don't get me wrong, 3 good players in their own right, but there's just been a lot of misses this cycle, it seems like, for Penn State.
I think that's a fair point. Again, going back to the names that we listed off just in the state of Pennsylvania, between Matt Zollers, who was probably the number 1 overall, regardless of position. Then you go to Zahir Mathis, then you go to Michael Carroll. Those have to be, honestly, your top 3 in that order. Or maybe they had Carroll as number 2 and Zahir Mathis as number 3, but they were the top in the top 5 for the priority big board targets, and they never got them. Then Jarquez Carter's not even considering Penn State, even though they like him a lot. He's actually considering Ohio State or Miami. And then there's Kemajou. Yvon's out of the state of Maryland. So again, that DC, Maryland, Virginia area that Penn State has done so well. But then you're telling me that he's just not as much of a priority, and they're only going to target him if they don't get Randy Adirika, because Carter's not even an option for them.
Yeah, they're only going to take 1 defensive tackle this cycle. But going back to the in-state thing, like going back to Lex Cyrus, honestly, if you lose out on a guy like that that's been long time favored to Penn State, it's just such a kick in the nuts. There's really no other way to say it. They've just been losing so many in-state guys. It really hurts them on the recruiting trail this cycle. And like you said, it's supposed to be keep the best in-state stay in-state, and it just really hasn't been that way since NIL started.
Let's go back to Zahir Mathis, and I think that's a good topic to debate in the final segment. So how Penn State has just gone from dominate the state year in and year out to everybody's coming into Pennsylvania and fleecing the Nittany Lions. Zahir Mathis is an interesting case because he committed to Ohio State fairly early in this cycle. Larry Johnson used to coach at Penn State. Now he's the defensive line coach with Ohio State. So he has those recruiting ties to Pennsylvania, obviously, and he is a very good position coach. I think Larry Johnson's one of the best recruiters and defensive line coaches purely. But then Zahir Mathis takes, to the recruiting analysts, not so much of a surprise, but to the spectators, yes, a surprise last-second official visit in the month of June. I recently I saw that Rivals put out an article, like The Fact or Fiction, where people say, hey, should you watch out for a potential Zahir? One of the topics was, is Zahir Mathis going to flip and stay home in Pennsylvania? One reporter said, fiction, Ohio State still has a pretty good, standing with its recruitment of Mathis. You gave your feedback as well, which was, don't count Penn State out here.
Yeah, now I'm not going to say it's a definite that he's going to flip. Of course, it's Ohio State, like you mentioned. It's Larry Johnson, who I don't even think it's arguable at this point. He probably is the best defensive line coach in college football.
Fair.
But yeah, I mean, it's not going to be easy. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that he only took one official visit this June recruiting period, and that was to Penn State, it wasn't even Ohio State, tells me he's at least pondering the idea. On top of that, I've talked to his teammate and running back, Penn State running back commit, Jabri Wallace-Coleman, and he told me he's heavily recruiting him, trying to get him to flip as much as he can. I mean, you can only say so many things at the end of the day, but he also has a very strong bond with Deion Barnes, Penn State's defensive line coach. He's also a Philadelphia native. He also went to Penn State. He also made it to the NFL from Penn State. So you can kind of sell all that right away. Now, it's not as big of, I guess, a coaching resume as Larry Johnson, but he could sell the idea of, I've been in your shoes. I've done it literally from down the street in Philadelphia. So, I mean, you could be the crown jewel of this recruiting class as well. And that's always, it plays a big factor in some recruitments, maybe some more than others, but I do think they have a legitimate shot, whether it be the bond with the coaching staff, whether it be the fact that Penn State was his first offer back in May 2021. And then obviously some teammates are also pushing him as well too. So it's definitely not going to be easy, but I definitely think you might see him on campus again this fall for a game.
The last one, Richie, I want to address this because this is circulating on social media. It's a quote at the end of an article from a running back target, or a running back commit, I should say, and Keandre Barker. He's obviously strong ties because he's grown up there. Now he did transfer high schools, didn't get to play, but he is back in Arkansas. And Barker says that he's keeping Arkansas in the back of his mind. They still have a chance. Is that just a vague quote? Again, that's literally the last sentence of the local article. Is there worry here? Because he did say, he had the graphic that said, I'm 110% committed. I'm shutting it all down. I am all in on Penn State. Does this say that that's not the case, or is that just maybe a misunderstanding here?
There's a couple things to this one. So obviously an Arkansas kid being down the street, I think BB High School that he's attending now, I believe it's only like 15 to 20 miles away from University of Arkansas. So it's going to be very easy for him to get to campus if he wants to go check out a game. I don't want to blame a high school kid when they want to go to a college football game, because I would have killed for free tickets back then. And it's like, as a high school recruit, you get to go on the sideline, you get to experience everything. But he did have a June official visit for Arkansas that was canceled last minute. And then that's when that 110% committed tweet came out. It sounds like Penn State convinced him not to make the visit. It's going to be hard to hold on to him, I think, just because you already have two other running backs in the class, and it's very unusual to have three in a single class. On top of that, we know Stanford's pushing T.Q. Hayes still. They're also Jabri Wallace-Coleman's probably the most solidified of the three running back commits.
Interestingly enough,
the most recent commit, which is crazy. But Keandre Barker also has an agent as well working with him for NIL, so that's going to play a factor. And we know Arkansas isn't afraid to spend a lot of money on the basketball court. In the football field, it's a little bit different. They probably don't have as much, which is crazy to say. But yeah, it's insane to say, actually. But they will spend. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to hold on to him. And now that he's back in Arkansas, I don't think Penn State wanted him back in Arkansas. I kind of think they would have rather him stay with Beckham Kritza, with some targets like Randy Adirika down at Miami Central. But obviously some things didn't work out there. And now he's back in Arkansas. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough to hold on to him. I would keep a close eye on it. If I had to guess, I would say there's probably only going to be two running backs on signing day, but that's just kind of an assumption at this point.
So this is a make or break week, given that there's just a lot of unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty with other priority targets for Penn State that just remain uncommitted. We'll tie it all together here in the final segment. Why Penn State is having a roller coaster recruiting cycle. They've done well in spots, and other times it's just been head scratching. Why is that? We'll discuss that in the final segment here. And in this final segment, it has just been a strange recruiting cycle, Richie. And that includes the fact of Troy Hune in the class of 2026 committing from the state of California. You have Darius Dixon committing from the state of California, as well as a cornerback in the class of 2025. So, dominate the state, okay. Is that almost consequential to where we are with college football? I think it is, and I've discussed this with Brian Smith, who's a national recruiting expert in his own right too, that NIL, the modern age of technology, you just can't rely on regional recruiting anymore, and you can build relationships through technology. So in 5 years ago, you don't get Troy Hune in the class. You don't get Dixon in the class of 2025 out of modern day. Really, modern day to Penn State. So that's where the relationship pays off. And of course, yes, NIL is going to be a factor. Yes, Penn State has NIL, but they can get pushed around from time to time if they do get into a head-to-head battle with the wrong school is the point. So you combine NIL with where we are as far as technology goes, and then the conference realignment. So you have USC, you have Oregon, you have Washington. Those schools are coming over to Maryland, DC, Virginia. Oregon gets a commitment from Brandon Finney, right? They had Tyzer Denmark once upon a time, and then Penn State's able to flip him. But now Penn State's going back and returning the favor.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be national recruiting, especially when you're on a national scale like Penn State is. They have the national brand, the exposure. Whether it be the Big Ten Conference, adding some schools from the West Coast, that always helps, of course, because now you could sell the idea, hey, we'll be out there at least once a year. Like I know your family's far away, but they'll see you at least once a year, maybe twice a year, depending on if they want to make the trip up to Oregon or the trip up to Washington or the trip down to UCLA or something. It's going to be interesting to see how more regional this recruiting goes. I mean, look, they're in it right now for a Texas wide receiver. I know he's got PA ties, but Texas, like you don't see it too often. But the California recruiting is definitely going to be at the forefront going forward, especially at quarterback, I think, just because there's so many talented quarterbacks out of California, out of the West Coast in general. That's where a lot of these top name gunslingers are coming from now. And the fact that Penn State's able to get one in the 2026 class this early at his ranking too, a top 100 kid, huge for them. Now, going back to like a Dixon was a kid that fell in love with the Big Ten a long time ago. Like he just loved the style of football. It's hard mouth. It's going to punch you in the nose type of football. It's old school football. It's fun. It's fun for some, I should say. The SEC is probably not a fan of it, but or SEC fans aren't a fan of it. But it's old school, punch you in the mouth football, and he loved that style. And then on top of that, he built a great relationship with the coaching staff. Also, again, we can go back to the NFL pipeline. They've produced how many cornerbacks now in the NFL? And it seems like almost every year we're seeing a first round or second round pick in the NFL from a Penn State cornerback, insert name here. So it all kinds of adds up, but I definitely think you have to go more national recruiting now more than ever. Now you want to keep the in-state kids, but you also have to open up the floodgates for elsewhere too, I should say.
I think part of this is it's not all Penn State's fault. Yes, Penn State is responsible for recruiting these players, but I also think more schools are just getting the attention of these players. I think in years past, and Alabama would not go up to Pennsylvania to recruit a Michael Carroll. So 5 years ago, Alabama would not go up to Pennsylvania to recruit Michael Carroll. Same thing, Missouri would not pay attention to Matt Zollers as much. Maybe they would, say, hey, here's an offer. Maybe we can get you down to campus. But the constant push, I think that's where technology pays off, right? Zoom and everything else. I've made the joke that, Steve Sarkisian with Diabell, he just knows how to work an iPhone because that's the case. Like Diabell's in Florida, he had, I don't want to say limited communication, but he had a few phone calls, took a visit, and everything worked out that way. And it was almost the same case as Troy Hune. So the fact that James Franklin knows how to work an iPhone or Steve Sarkisian, whatever coach you want to work in there, it's national recruiting. It's not about regional. Try your best to keep players in state as much as you can. But I think this is just a consequence of where college football has headed.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's just so much easier, like you said, to build relationships. It's also easier to scout too. A lot of times they wouldn't go after these guys because they don't know much about, like,
You don't
say,
see them.
Alabama. Alabama's like, I don't know anything about Pennsylvania. Is this kid like just going up against like the lowest public school or lowest attended public school in Pennsylvania? Maybe, I don't know. But now you have huddle tape like around more than ever. That's why I don't know if you noticed, like, but most of these recruiting rankings are getting more and more accurate for the sole fact that there's just more tape out there. There's more film out there, whether it be
Right.
YouTube, whether it be Huddle, whether it be some other service or whatever. These kids are going to all kinds of camps. They want to get as many offers as possible too. And the fact that they're willing to travel and say like school, now they're not going to help each other that much, but like if a smaller school like Delaware saw a kid and they knew he wasn't going to go to Delaware, they knew he had multiple Power 5 offers, and there's a coach on Delaware staff that knew someone on Penn State staff, they'd be like, yo, you guys got to check this guy out. Like, we're not going to get him, obviously, because we're not even FBS right now.
Right.
So check him out. Like, he said he likes Penn State. There you go. And they all help each other at the end of the day, especially the lower level assistants, because they want to move up too. And it's just a giant of like, just there's so much more stuff out there, whether it be film, whether it be technology in general. You want to just make it kind of that generalization. It's just technology. It's so much easier to recruit, so much easier to evaluate, and it just makes everything a lot easier. And that's why you're seeing so many schools go to different states.
He is Richie O'Leary of Penn State Rivals, Rutgers Rivals, and UConn Rivals, publisher for all three sites. Richie, thanks so much for the time and the updates regarding Penn State's remaining priority targets in the class of 2025. I encourage everyone to go check out happyvalleyinsider.com and all of the platforms that Richie posts to and social media. And we'll have links for those down in the description. Richie, thanks so much again for the time.
Yeah, no problem, Zach. Thanks for having me. Always excited to talk some Penn State football recruiting.
And of course, as always, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the conversation. What do you think about Penn State's recruiting class for the 2025 cycle and just how much of a roller coaster it's been? Be a part of the discussion down in the comments section. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a like on the episode, share it with friends and family. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And of course, don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.